Most people assume that wartime home defense was improvised, temporary boards nailed across windows, sandbags stacked in panic, glass taped in hasty X patterns to prevent shattering during air raids. That image is incomplete. Across Britain and parts of continental Europe during the Second World War, civilians quietly adopted a window defense method so mechanically sound, so low-tech, and so psychologically effective that it remains difficult for intruders to defeat even today. It was not barbed wire, it was not steel plating. It was a simple cross-braced wooden shutter system installed on the interior, designed to resist blast pressure, forced entry, and prying tools with a principle as old as timber framing itself, triangulation. The lesson is not that wartime civilians were inventive under pressure, though they were. The lesson is that scarcity forces clarity. When steel was rationed, labor was limited, and air raids were routine, people returned to structural fundamentals, and in doing so they created a defensive solution modern homeowners still underestimate. So, what civilians quickly discovered once the bombings started was just how dangerous windows could be. Back in 1940, during the Blitz, glass turned into both a hazard and a vulnerability almost overnight. You see, bomb blast overpressure would shatter windows even far beyond the immediate impact zone, sending shards flying everywhere. Even when buildings managed to stay standing, flying shards of glass often caused injury and left interiors exposed to the weather and, honestly, to looting as well. At first, government advice was to tape the glass to cut down on fragmentation, but really, this did very little when it came to actual structural failure. And once the glass was gone, the empty window opening itself became a real liability. Windows, it turned out, were the weakest part of most homes. Brick walls could handle concussive force much better than any framed opening, and, well, burglars, working under blackout conditions, definitely understood this vulnerability. Urban police reports from London and Liverpool noted a steady pattern. Properties damaged in raids were often entered not through doors, but through compromised windows, so civilians adapted, not randomly, but with carpentry traditions deeply embedded in British building culture. Timber yards were still accessible. Salvaged wood from damaged structures was common. What emerged was not simply boarded windows, but reinforced interior shutters, mounted with diagonal bracing. Why diagonal bracing matters more than thick wood? The critical insight was structural geometry. A flat board across a window can be kicked inward. A thick plank without support can split. But a rectangular frame reinforced with a diagonal brace creates two triangles within the structure. Triangles do not deform under pressure unless their members fail. Rectangles do. You know, this principle had actually been used for a long time in barn doors and gates, but during the war it was applied to window shutters as well. Civilians would build these wooden frames carefully sized to fit tightly within interior window recesses. Across that frame, folks fixed a diagonal brace running from the lower hinge side to the upper latch side. This orientation was important because it made sure that gravity and any external force would compress the brace rather than pulling it apart. So, when blast pressure hit the exterior of a house, the shutter would absorb and redistribute the force into the surrounding wall. And when someone tried to use a pry bar from outside, resistance didn't just increase in a straight line, it actually increased geometrically. The more force that was applied, the tighter the internal bracing held, up to the point of material failure, which honestly required far more effort than most opportunistic intruders could manage quickly. This wasn't just decorative carpentry, it was in fact defensive engineering under constraint. Blackouts, really changed the psychology of burglary. The wartime blackout introduced another overlooked factor. With streetlights extinguished and windows covered to prevent light leakage, cities became darker than at any point in modern urban history. Interestingly, darkness protects defenders just as much as it shields attackers. Interior shutters. Well, they served a dual function. They prevented light from escaping and also preserved night vision inside the home. Unlike exterior boards which signaled vacancy or damage, interior shutters were invisible from the street. A burglar, honestly, could not easily assess whether a window was merely curtained or structurally reinforced. Police records and post-war studies on crime trends suggest that forced entry burglaries did not spike as dramatically as one might expect during sustained bombing campaigns. Part of that restraint came from community vigilance and civil defense patrols, but part came from uncertainty. An intruder approaching a darkened home could not predict resistance. Preparedness in this case altered risk calculation before force was ever applied. Material scarcity forced smarter construction. It is important to understand what civilians did not have. Steel security bars were impractical. Metal was prioritized for aircraft, munitions, and vehicles. Even nails were rationed. Timber, especially reclaimed timber, was often the most accessible material. That constraint led to efficient design. Instead of thick slabs of wood, people used frames constructed from modest dimension lumber, reinforced correctly. The original motivation was blast mitigation, not crime prevention. Yet, the physics really do overlap. Blast pressure is a rapid, distributed force across a surface, while forced entry is a concentrated force applied at leverage points. A structure capable of resisting one within limits performs well against the other. Interior shutters backed by diagonal bracing created depth. An intruder breaking glass encountered not empty space, but a secondary barrier flush against the interior wall. Tools like crowbars depend on space to generate leverage. By minimizing that space and reinforcing corners, civilians reduced mechanical advantage. Moreover, shutters were often closed and latched before nightfall as part of blackout protocol. This meant defenses were in place consistently, not reactively. Consistency is the core of effective preparedness. Sporadic security fails under routine. Modern burglary studies consistently show that time and noise are the primary deterrents. Intruders favor targets that yield quickly. A reinforced interior shutter, properly built, significantly increases both. If you value this kind of careful historical analysis where overlooked details reveal enduring lessons, subscribe to The Prepper Historian and share this video with others who take preparedness and history seriously.